Where has my ring gone? It was a precious ring I inherited from my mother, which I always looked at when I was feeling down. It was a special ring with a big shining diamond. I thought I had hidden it deep in my cosmetic box, but for some reason it was missing from its usual place. I panicked and searched around thinking it couldn't be so, but it was nowhere to be found. In my rush, I headed towards the living room to search elsewhere. And just as I was about to open the living room door, I overheard an unbelievable conversation. I thought that ring with the big diamond would sell for a lot, but it didn't go as high as I expected. Yeah, but it sold for 2 million. So isn't that all right? Can't be helped. Now that we have 2 million, should we go on a trip? Going abroad would be nice. Sounds great. I was so shocked that I found myself letting go of the doorknob and returning to my room. Tom should know how much I cherished the ring and how carefully I had kept it all these years. I can't believe he sold it. Beyond sadness, an uncontrollable anger welled up inside me. I'll never forget this. Tom is my beloved son who I've raised with so much love, but I've decided to disown him. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm a 51-year-old career woman traveling and working all around the country. Recently, I got a promotion, so the frequency of my business trips has decreased, but I'm still living a busy life. My husband passed away due to an illness 7 years ago. He had always had a weak constitution, and after our marriage, he became a full-time house husband, supporting our home. There were various opinions from people around us about this choice, but regardless of what anyone said, I was proud of him. After graduating from university, he chose not to work and got married at the young age of 22, becoming a house husband. There were critical voices about this. Even so, I felt blessed, supported by my husband, and only friends who respected and understood our choices remained. Moreover, I was very fortunate with my workplace. Even though I was a new employee, the company allowed me to take maternity leave. Thanks to this, I was able to adjust my working hours for a work-life balance, and I could return home at the end of the stand-up working hours. We only have one child between us. Considering the fiscal toll, the first childbirth must have taken on my frail husband, who didn't have the capacity to think of having another. The three of us lived happily together, and neither my husband nor I wanted or sought anything more. However, when our eldest son, Tom, turned 20, cancer was found in my husband. The two of us went for a full medical checkup once a year, and that's when it was pointed out. Even though nothing seemed wrong during the last examination, by the time it was pointed out, the disease had already ravaged my husband's body. I've never regretted anything more than not suggesting we have those medical checkups every 6 months. His condition had already advanced, and at the young age of 43, my husband was given only 1 year to live. Hoping to spend as much time as possible with him, we decided to start chemotherapy immediately. There were side effects, and his inability to move properly and do household chores seemed to stress him, but he acted strong in front of us. 6 months after the diagnosis, at my husband's request, we switched from life-prolonging treatment to a more palliative one, preparing for end-of-life care. Desiring to make his remaining time as peaceful as possible, I racked my brains for anything I could do to help. The biggest decision I made was about our home. We originally lived in a 2 LDK apartment in the city center. We had already finished paying off the mortgage. It was a home full of memories for our family, but the view had been ruined by a new large apartment building nearby. So, I decided to buy a new house in countryside. Our original home was left to our eldest son, Tom, who would live there and cover the utility with his part-time job earnings. I also discussed with my company and got my job responsibility changed, eliminating business trips, shifting to remote work, and maximizing my time with my husband. If a trip was absolutely necessary, I'd have a subordinate go in my place, and I'd participate in the meetings online from home. Thanks to these adjustments, I could spend 6 months happily with my husband and was able to be with him until the end. Tom visited once a week, and in the end, we both were there to say our final goodbyes. In the end, we only lived in the new house for about 6 months, but I continued living in the apartment with Tom while still paying the mortgage. 7 years have passed since my husband's death, and my Tom has grown into an adult and started working. Just him becoming a working adult was joyous, but he also met a wonderful woman, and they decided to get married. I was excited to meet her and couldn't help but smile. My eldest son's bride, Catherine, was a stunningly beautiful woman. I was amazed, to be honest. It's hard to say Tom is conventionally handsome, so I was curious how he won her heart. Apparently, Catherine pursued him vigorously. It turns out Catherine's parents had already passed away, and she didn't have much relatives she was close to. I suggested a formal meeting, but due to her strained relationships with her few relatives and her most solitary upbringing, she strongly refused. Feeling it would be too cruel to push her, we decided against the formal introduction. I want to support Catherine from now on. Seeing the determination in Tom's eyes when he said those words reminded me of when I first met my husband. Witnessing Tom's growth brought tears to my eyes, even though he had only come to announce his engagement. Not long after, Tom and Catherine got married. They seemed to be struggling to find a house that Catherine liked. Upon hearing this, I suggested they temporarily stay in my apartment. Given my frequent business trips and a home office setup, I felt living in the house where I spent time with my late husband might be a good change. Moreover, I wasn't keen on intruding into their newlywed life. That'd be a great help, thank you. Tom expressed his gratitude, but Catherine never directly thanked me. Still, I knew Tom was thankful on behalf of both of them, so I didn't mind much. A few months later, Tom paid me a surprise visit with an unexpected proposal. Mom, Catherine wants to stay here permanently. She seems to like the environment. What do you think about us living together? Live together with you and Catherine here? I mean, I was taken aback by the sudden suggestion. I was used to living alone and felt comfortable that way. The idea of sharing a space, even with my son and daughter-in-law, felt intrusive. Moreover, no matter how wrong it felt to think so, Catherine was still a stranger to me. The idea of cohabiting brought nothing but apprehensions. If living together in the same space makes you uncomfortable, what about renovating and making it a two-family home? Well, in that case, Tom persisted, and eventually, I agreed to the idea of renovating the house into a two-family home. Tom could only offer $6,000 as a down payment due to his savings situation. As a result, I had to take in a loan for the renovation costs. Should anything happen to me, Tom would take over, so I agreed to bear the other expenses. However, Tom's promised payment never came. I reminded him several times, and while he initially appeared apologetic, he eventually became distant, so I stopped pressing him. In the end, I lost touch with Tom. On the rare occasions we did talk, the atmosphere wasn't right to bring up the money, and the house was completed without him ever paying the promised amount. Nice to living with you from today, Emily. Likewise, Catherine. I'm looking forward to it. As soon as Catherine arrived at the house, she briefly greeted me and went straight to their side of the house. The lack of any talk about money or words of gratitude left me feeling uneasy. Originally a single-story house, a second floor was added for my eldest son and his wife. Catherine had strongly desired that the living room be shared. The floor plan seemed a bit unusual, but considering that they would eventually live here as one household, it didn't seem too strange. After looking around the house, I called out to Tom, who was nearby. Tom, when I'm away on business trips, could you please help with cleaning the house? You're welcome to anything in the fridge. Huh? Me? Oh, right. Why do you even ask for such things? So bothersome. I was surprised by Tom's words. I had never thought of him as someone who would say such things, but it crossed my mind that perhaps Catherine was influencing him. However, I quickly dismissed the thought as rude and shook my head. Perhaps it was my oversight, and I had unknowingly raised him this way. I had left so much up to my husband. There must have been aspects of Tom I wasn't familiar with. That's what I decided to believe. Regardless of what he said, if Tom would clean, that's good enough for now. I reassured myself with that thought. However, soon after we began living as two households, I regretted my decision to cohabit. The first sign was evident when I returned from a business trip. After being away for almost half a month, I found layers of dust on tables and shelves. It was clear that if even a simple cleaning had been done once a week, it wouldn't have gotten this bad. This meant that, during my absence, Tom hadn't cleaned even once. Hey Tom, you remember I asked you to clean while I was away, right? As I spoke to Tom at the entrance, he didn't respond, just looked at me and entered his house. Did he just ignore me? I was surprised and honestly shocked by Tom's unexpected behavior, even though we made eye contact. I felt uneasy seeing Tom like that. so I immediately knocked on the door to the house where he lives with his wife. However, even though Tom should be home, he didn't answer. Suddenly, Catherine appeared from behind. "Oh, Catherine, sorry. I believe Tom's inside." Acting as if she hadn't heard me, Catherine brushed past me, unlocked the door, and went inside. Catherine's treatment of me, as if I were invisible, left me even more puzzled. Were they both in a bad mood about something? Their new life had just begun, and perhaps things weren't going well. Thinking I might be overreacting, I headed to my own front door. But soon, I realized my feeling of being troubled was justified. Huh, the door won't open. Believing there might be a misunderstanding, I tried to open the door to the living room, but it was locked from the inside. I could hear the two of them chatting happily behind the door. I tried turning the doorknob several times. Even though the sound of the doorknob turning echoed in the living room repeatedly, Tom and Catherine's conversation never stopped. I had to admit that both of them were intentionally ignoring me. Why? What had I done wrong? Despite pondering, I couldn't find an answer. Waves of loneliness and sadness washed over me, and I soaked my pillow with tears as I slept throughout the night. Dawn broke, and the situation remained unchanged for some reason. Tom and Catherine continued to ignore me. The uncertainty of not knowing the reason was unbearable. However, as time went by, my feelings gradually changed. I got used to this new lifestyle, and deep down, started feeling like nothing more than an unwanted guest. Thinking of my husband and recalling the times when I lovingly raised Tom would bring forth emotions, but continued to neglect to face those feelings. Before I knew it, all I could think of was how to sever ties with Tom and Catherine. I had prepared the necessary paperwork. All that remained was to go through with it. Even with everything ready, my emotional attachment and memories of a younger Tom held me back. But one day, an event occurred that finally pushed me over the edge. As usual, I returned home from a business trip, only to encounter an unthinkable incident. Where has my ring gone? It was a precious ring I'd inherited from my mother, one I'd always gaze upon whenever I felt down. A special ring with a shining large diamond. I was sure I had hidden it deep within my makeup box, but for some reason, it wasn't in its usual place. In disbelief, I frantically searched around, but it was nowhere to be found. In a panic, I headed to the living room to check elsewhere. But the moment I was about to open the living room door, I overheard a conversation that I couldn't believe. I thought that ring, such a large diamond, would fetch a high price, but it didn't sell for as much as I expected. Yeah, but we did sell it for $2 million, so I guess that's decent. I can't complain. We got 2 million. So why not go on a trip? Maybe abroad? Sounds great. Overwhelmed with shock, I found myself letting go of the doorknob and retreating back to my room. Tom should know how much sentimental value I placed on that ring, and how dearly I had treasured it. To think he sold it, beyond the sadness, an uncontrollable anger bubbled up within me. I never forgive him. Tom was my beloved son, raised with all the love I could give. Yet, I resolved to cut ties with him. I immediately sold the condominium I owned in the city. With the maintenance fee getting higher, it was a timely decision. Using that money, I purchased a new condominium for investment purposes. Following that, I also sold a plot of land where our two-family home stood. Though it was in the countryside, I originally built the house there because of my job, ensuring it was in a location with good transport links. Its value remained high, and I was able to sell it for almost the purchase price. I had been paying off the mortgage for that house ahead of schedule, so half of the selling price stayed in my hands. With the money I received from the sale and my minimal belongings, I decided to embark on a new chapter in my life. When leaving the house, I called out in the living room, "Thank you for everything." But the continued cold shoulder from Tom and his wife persisted. Their reaction was so expected that it felt almost comical, making me burst into a smile. Half a month passed since then. Since I often went on business trips, Tom didn't contact me, thinking it was just one of my usual absences. Fortunately, during that time, thoughts of Tom didn't bother me, and I was able to hire a lawyer and proceed smoothly with various preparations for the future. A month later, I finally received a call from Tom. "Hey Mom, what's going on?" I received a notice saying they are going to demolish this house by the end of the month. Tom's voice was clearly frantic due to the sudden demolition. However, it was apparent that, despite making him pay for utilities and property taxes, he assumed he could continue living in the house even after I left, which made me leave involuntarily. Why are you laughing? Of course I'm laughing. I was the one who paid for everything for that house, right? Whatever I decided to do with it is my business, isn't it? It wasn't just you living there. Why would you go ahead and do this without consulting me? What are you talking about? Acting all entitled without paying a cent? That house is mine. Do I really need to consult you? Still heated, Tom hurriedly confronted me, but I calmly answered and brushed him off. Tom stumbled on his words and went silent. But his thoughtlessness just made me feel pity for him, and I could only sigh. You didn't charge me for anything in the past 2 years, and now suddenly. Of course I tried to bill you multiple times, but who kept ignoring them? If we can't even have a conversation, how can I bill you? But that's. He seemed to want to counter, but no more words came from Tom. Silence settled on the phone line once more. Sensing his hesitation, I asked Tom if he was open to discussing matters. Well, I guess maybe. You were so indecisive. I need to discuss this with Catherine too. Tom's evasiveness only made me pity him more, and I sighed even deeper than before. Hearing this, Tom, seemingly irritated, began to speak with a forceful tone. I didn't want things to turn out this way, but Catherine kept saying you never really did any cleaning or cooking and was always slacking off. She said she felt there was no need to get along, and I thought there might be some truth in that slacking off. Tom, you do realize I was working, right? Of course, I know that, but Catherine works too, and we share household chores. You and Catherine are both working, right? Your father was a stay-at-home dad who loved housework. We discussed and decided to do what each of us was good at. Don't you understand that? Was that the case? Surprisingly, Tom seemed completely unaware of this. I knew he was laid back and a bit oblivious at times, but I never imagined he was this clueless. It seems Catherine had been feeding him various reasons about how incompetent I was as a mother, even going as far as to suggest that as a toxic parent, I should be punished. What shocked me most was that Tom had swallowed all of this without question. Wait, did I misunderstand something? I'm speechless. Just think about it calmly on your own. I'm busy, so goodbye. With mixed feelings, I hung up. Later, I contacted the lawyer I had hired and had them inform Tom and Catherine of the date and time for our meeting. On the day of the discussion, I arrived early at the agreed-upon location with my lawyer. Tom and Catherine showed up a little late. Catherine looked clearly displeased as she met my gaze. Look, I'm busy with both work and housework. You called me here. Can we wrap this up quickly? Catherine, stop it. Stop interrupting me. Reprimanded sharply by Catherine, Tom shrunk back like a scolded child. It became evident that, although he had grown physically, mentally he was still immature, making me deeply disappointed in my own son. That's right. Let's discuss what we need to and conclude as quickly as possible. Maybe irritated by my taunt, Catherine's face grew even more displeased. In this tense atmosphere, I decided to speak calmly and clearly. You probably know this already, but that house is set to be demolished in a week. You've already decided on where you're moving to, right? Why should I have to find a new place? Both that house and the apartment, they are mine. Catherine shouted at me with fierce intensity, but I remained unmoved. It seemed Catherine hadn't fully grasped her position. I placed the documents and a copy of the property registry, which I had received from the real estate agent, in front of her. Catherine looked shocked as she glanced at the papers. Why? The house was supposed to be in Tom's name, right? I don't know what leads you to believe that, but the house has never been in Tom's name. Both are in my name, but it was supposed to be your husband's house. Shouldn't Tom inherit it? Where did you get the idea that the house was in my husband's name? My husband, thinking ahead, had everything registered in my name. Catherine's face went pale, and she fell silent. Catherine, who had been so assertive, seemed to have mistakenly believed that everything was registered under Tom's name. Of course, neither Tom nor I ever thought that. It is true that if I were to pass away, the properties would eventually be transferred to Tom's name. But that's a different matter. Also, about my ring which you sold off, I expect it to be returned in full. What? What are you talking about? Without any hesitation, I handed a document to Catherine, whose face turned even paler. Upon seeing the document, Catherine recoiled slightly, as if wanting to escape. Unexpected reaction. After all, the document was a sales contract between Catherine and the pawn shop where she sold my ring. How do you have this? When I reported to the police that my ring was stolen, they looked into it for me. What? The police? Catherine was clearly taken aback at the mention of the police, her face growing even more tense. Seeing her reaction, I replied with a smile. Yes, it was stolen after all. It's only natural to consult with the police. They should assist once I file a formal complaint. However, if I can just get the ring back, that's enough for me. What will you do? I understand. I'll find the ring and return it. Just please not the police. Both Tom and Catherine work at the same company. For them, as employees, getting involved in a police case would be problematic. Their company thrives on trust from other businesses, so if word got out about the theft, termination would be almost certain. Realizing this, Catherine seemed quite panicked. So, can you return it to me within a month? It's a treasure to me. Yes. Catherine promptly called the pawn shop to inquire about the ring. I thought it might be difficult since so much time had passed, but fortunately, the pawn shop remembered the buyer of the ring. Thanks to this, they were able to establish contact with the buyer. Knowing this, Catherine seemed completely relieved. But I didn't let up. I'm glad you found the ring. Now, about the compensation for my emotional distress. What? Compensation? What are you talking about? Shocked by the sudden revelation, Catherine's voice, filled with disbelief, echoed throughout the store. Had there been people around, she would have surely been the center of attention. Seeing the utterly flustered Catherine, I calmly proceeded to explain the breakdown of the compensation. I can't believe you're demanding compensation from your only son. I never thought this day would come either. It's surprising that one can't differentiate between right and wrong. Stung by the sharp words, Catherine hung her head. Even if she seemed regretful now, my determination wouldn't change. Having to buy back the ring, plus paying the compensation, even Catherine was at a loss for words. I then handed over a decisive piece of evidence to the married couple, Tom and Catherine. Catherine's face turned ashen upon seeing it, while Tom's eyes widened in disbelief. What? What is this? It's not what it looks like, Tom. This is. Catherine seemed even more shocked than before, struggling to find words. A natural reaction. The document clearly showed Catherine reveling at a house club. Catherine, what's the meaning of this? It's not what you think. This isn't. Catherine quickly denied it. But the photo clearly showed her entering a hotel with a man, leaving no room for excuses. Then, I placed a photograph on the table that captured Tom's infidelity. Speaking of which, who is this woman? Who's that man with you? Let's talk about that first. The couple, now completely different from just a moment ago, seemed to be in a frenzy, as if they didn't even notice my presence. Watching their pitiful display, I left a simple note saying goodbye and departed with my lawyer. It seems that Tom and his wife packed up and left on the morning the demolition of their house began. However, since they obviously had no money, they had to live in a much shabbier apartment than before. Although they are a working couple, they should have been earning enough for their living expenses. However, Catherine had gotten so into going to house clubs that she had gone into debt, so there was no way they had any savings. They seemed to be living a life where most of their salary is used for debt repayment and compensation. They considered divorce, but neither had the money or energy, so they seemed to be still living together without separation. Despite the circumstances, they work at the same place and have to see each other daily, leading to nightly arguments at home. There's no love between them, and it seems Catherine approached Tom, thinking he owned 2 houses. She wanted to live with me so that after getting married, she could leave the household chores to me and live freely. Catherine carelessly told her friend about this, which spread within the company, and her reputation has been steadily declining ever since. As for Tom, he's called a few times since, but I've been ignoring him. I had my lawyer tell him not to call unless it's through him. The compensation payments have been continuing without any issues. Thanks to selling 2 houses, I have money and am enjoying my single life. I disposed of everything except for mementos of my husband and keepsakes for my mother, and I decided to live in hotel rooms for long stays during work trips or vacations. It was my first time doing this, and while I was initially anxious, I realized that the hotel life suits me, and I plan to keep it this way as long as I work. Work remains busy, and I'm living my life traveling around the country. I was hesitant about losing the house filled with memories of my husband, but the memories remain intact in photos and my mind. As long as I have those, it feels like my husband is with me. Today, the sky is clear.